Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. Folks, we're getting close to the midterm elections,
Yes.
and so we decided we are going to dive all the way into the polling, the candidates, the Democrats, the Republicans, the House, the Senate. There's also new polling from the New York Times that we teased about a million times yesterday during the show that we were going to dig into as well. So the whole show is going to be election focused, save for our monologue. Saagar is looking at energy crisis.
Yes.
Looking at the crisis in Sri Lanka that is spreading to a lot of other countries in the developing world. But to start with, a couple of announcements.
Two announcements, housekeeping. Number one, live show. Let's put this up there on the screen. So, center stage, Atlanta. We are coming September 16th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got a great show planned for all of you. We would deeply appreciate it if you bought tickets. As we said, it's a way to show the industry. We can sell a bunch of tickets. We have to sell this thing out. So please, please help us out if you're in the area or elsewhere. And that way we can plan a great big tour all across the country. It's very, very helpful to us.
All right, so we wanted to start with that New York Times polling, which is deeply revealing both about Biden, the Democratic Party, Trump, the Republican Party, all kinds of things to get into here. So let's start with the big picture, how the country is feeling about the president and how Democrats are feeling about President Biden right now. Let's go ahead and put this first part up on the screen. So this is the New York Times headline. They say, most Democrats don't want Biden in 2024. New poll shows with the country gripped by a pervasive sense of pessimism, the president is hemorrhaging support. So here are the specifics on those numbers. And this is quite stunning for an incumbent president. His own party, 64% of Democratic voters say they would prefer a new standard bearer in the 2024 presidential campaign. And his approval rating among all voters is just as abysmal as it could possibly be. Only a 33% job approval rating. When you dig into these numbers, you will not be surprised to learn that voters say the economy is extremely important to them. In fact, 75% of voters say the economy is extremely important to them. And yet only 1% of all voters rate economic conditions as excellent. Among those who are working age, only 6% said the economy was either good or excellent. So voters are saying overwhelmingly the economy is their number one issue, that it's extremely important to them, and that they think it is absolutely abysmal. One other piece on, we're going to dig in a moment into the sort of age breakdown here because the abandonment among young voters is particularly striking, given that this was the demographic that was supposed to set Democrats up for like permanent dominance within politics, and they are fleeing Joe Biden. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to the Republicans, but they are deeply dissatisfied with this president and with the direction of the country. But another thing that I thought was really notable within the number of Democratic voters saying they want a different candidate. You know, of course, Joe Biden, the reason he got the Democratic nomination overwhelmingly was because of his support among black voters. You now have more black voters than not saying they want a different nominee. So 47% of black Democratic voters say they would like to see someone other than Joe Biden as compared to 44% who say they want Biden right now. Let me just give you one quote from one of those voters and how they're thinking about this. 44-year-old Clifton Hurd, a maintenance specialist in Alabama, says, quote, anybody could be doing a better job than what they're doing right now. He's an independent. He said he voted for Biden in 2020, but his disillusion over the state of the economy and the spiraling price of gas is now reconsidering Trump. He says, I understand they've got a tough job of Mr. Biden's administration, but he was not prepared to do the job.
I also really loved this quote from a 38-year-old. She's a former factory worker in Greensburg, Indiana. She said she's been currently sidelined by a back injury. She says, quote, we used to spend $200 a week just going out to have fun or going and buying extra groceries if we needed it. Now we can't do that. We are barely able to buy what we need. And I especially love this part. I feel like he hasn't really spoken much about it. He hasn't done what I think he's capable of doing as president to help the American people. As a Democrat, I figured he would really be on our side and put us back on the right track. And I just feel like he is not. I mean, this speaks to something that we try and highlight every single day. People are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt if they feel like you're trying to do something about it. Not even if you are doing something about it, if you're trying to do something about it. And he is just simply not able to live up to that. So the decline of support in young people, which we're going to do an entire thing on, the decline of support amongst black voters, but also I think talking about age is important as well. The number one reason that people say that they don't want him to run again if he's as Democrats is age. And the crosstabs of that, as you pointed out, Krystal, are really interesting. It's older Democrats who are like, yeah, I think this guy is just too old.
Yeah.
And what they point to is, or what you said yesterday, it's like young people who overwhelmingly backed Bernie, who was older than Joe Biden, they don't care as much about age. Yes, they want younger blood and it kind of turns them off, but the sole determination of age is actually amongst people, this kind of makes sense, who know better, or who at least know people or are deeply familiar with what aging looks like. And I did my whole monologue on this yesterday. I played an interview with Biden just 10 years ago. You can't tell me that's the same guy. Just not. I mean, command of the facts, stature, even looks better, different, more full in the face, cogent, ability to engage, doesn't shuffle whenever he walks, doesn't stumble over his words. His gaffes were always, they were more like top of the mind saying what shouldn't be said, as opposed to, I don't know, misreading the teleprompter or just being genuinely unintelligible when speaking.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, the way I feel about it personally is that it's not his age per se, it's his ideology, it's his inability to meet the moment and do the job. And that's kind of the numbers that you get from young voters who say their number one issue with him is just his job performance.
Yes.
If he was, 90, but he was doing the job well, I wouldn't care. You could be however old you want if you're able to do the job. The problem is that he seems unable to do the job. So that's the number one issue for young voters. Number two is not progressive enough. That's a very different landscape from, as you point out, the oldest voters. And I actually hear this and see this commented online and hear it even from my own parents of, I can't imagine at this age being able to do the job of the presidency. Like, I feel what it is to start to slow down. And so to think of him, who is not, certainly at the top of his game, trying to handle this office is hard to watch and hard to imagine how this is working out. I think it is really, really stunning and cannot be said enough how much of a rebuke this is of Biden that his own party, a solid, almost 2/3 majority, says they want someone else.
Yeah.
And yet there was an article yesterday, a CNN reporter who reached out to all the sort of, elected Democrats who were being floated. Gavin Newsom is getting a lot of attention, running ads in Florida and all of this. And people are thinking, oh, maybe he's setting himself up for 2024. J.B. Pritzker, Ro Khanna, they reached out to all of these folks who've been floated as like, maybe they're going to be the one to primary Biden. And every one of them was like, nope, sitting by, standing by, not going to do it if Biden is in the race. And he's, in my view, he's 100% running if he's, able to.
Alive.
That's the only caveat is like if he literally doesn't make it there. But we're talking about, months before the presidential race really kicks off. We're talking about, I think he'll probably announce post-holidays. So we're talking about early in next year.
That's right.
So it's very, very soon that it's coming. And, I don't think that he will have a lot of, in terms of numerical challengers in the primary. I do think he will face a challenger from the left. Certainly Marianne Williamson has been thinking about it and floating it, and there may be others out there as well who are thinking about it because just as a historical matter, this is an incredibly weak president within his own party. People want another option. The thing I keep saying and keep thinking is, Joe Biden was the consensus choice because people were persuaded this was the guy who could win. And he just doesn't have the numbers to back that up anymore. Right. I mean, when you look at, go ahead and put actually the next graphic up on the screen that has his approval rating, or has right track, wrong track. I mean, you have massive numbers, almost 80% of voters saying that we're headed in the wrong direction. His overall approval rating in this poll is only 33%. So it's hard to look at those numbers and be like, oh yeah, this is the guy who's electable. This is the winner that you really want to put on the field. So it very much undercuts the core argument that he made to the Democratic primary base that got him in this slot to begin with.
I completely agree. I just think it's fascinating too that none of the Democrats are even opening the door to it. I mean, at this time in the 1970s, so let's say we're in roughly 1978, well, Ted Kennedy had very much top of mind. He's like, I think I'm going to challenge this guy. He's like, this guy's not doing well. And the lackluster results of the 1978 midterm elections are really what gave Kennedy the confidence to say, on top of the Iran-Contra crisis, he said, this guy can't do the job. I have to challenge him. We have to try and have a new generation. Now, look, Carter did beat him, ultimately in that primary, but it did certainly wound him going into the general. But the theory of the case, Kennedy was a bad candidate for a variety of reasons, but the thinking at the time was, like, there's just no way this guy can stand up to Ronald Reagan. They were right.
They were right.
They were actually totally right.
That's actually such a great point, because oftentimes the lesson that Democrats learn, and you see this even in the response from, I can't remember which one name checked this specifically, but this is the ethos coming from these Democrats who are saying, no, if Joe's running, like, we're out. I mean, Bernie Sanders obviously already took himself out of contention too. If Joe was running, which I think we all should assume that he ultimately is, the lesson they normally take is it was a mistake for Kennedy to primary Carter because that hurt Carter, and that's what leads to him losing to Ronald Reagan. No, that is not what led to the massive, like, landslide defeat of Jimmy Carter. In fact, the lesson should have been, when you had that weak president, you actually should have switched horses. Now, I don't know that Ted Kennedy was the right dude for it, but they actually did need to change who they were backing to have a prayer of being able to stop that, Reagan revolution coming into power, which has reset our politics now for an entire generation, for my entire life. So it's kind of the opposite lesson of what they should have learned. They should look at that and go, you know what? Kennedy was on to something. Carter was extremely weak, and we were going to get our butts handed to us, and we should have gone behind another nominee, but that is not the lesson they learn. And listen, I mean, they used the threat of Trump, right? Even though, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, even as these numbers are super dire for Joe Biden, in the head-to-head matchup with Trump, he still edges him out.
Still beats him.
Still beats him. And his numbers are better than the next most likely person, which is Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
So they're really kind of stuck. And I keep thinking about, remember when in France, Emmanuel Macron wins pretty easily over Marine Le Pen, in spite of the fact that I think his approval rating was in like the low to mid 30s as well. Very similar dynamic to Joe Biden. And Ron Klain, Biden's chief of staff, tweets out, interesting, that Macron is able to easily win with this very low approval rating. That's clearly the path that they think they're going to be able to walk, which is, listen, you may be totally miserable you may despise what you may be completely disappointed and disillusioned, but you're still going to like us better than that other guy. And that's what they're ultimately betting on. That's their only prayer.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, they have data to point to.
Yeah.
Macron did win. The poll does show him. And I just, look, it just shows what a messed up country we're in. There's actually a poll literally just came out this morning that relates to what you're saying. Should Trump run for president again? This is Politico Morning Consult, 2024. Yes, 35%. No, 61%. Should Biden run for president again? No. Yes, 29%. No, 64%. I mean, that's basically in the margin of error. You have 2/3 of the American people on both sides saying, I don't want either. And yet that is almost certainly to be the outcome. Crazy stuff could happen. I think if you're a Democrat, what you should plan on is a very likely contingency that Donald Trump may also be too old to be able to run. He also could have a health concern. He's not exactly the best health, and he may not be able to run in 2024. And if that's the case, I mean, Biden is dead. There's no way he stands up against Ron DeSantis or any generic Republican candidate.
Today, I agree with you. It is a long time between then and now, so I don't want to say, I think it's too early to make that assumption, but I do think that Trump is the most beatable of the Republicans when it comes to Joe Biden. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.